My dad stole my $90,000 military separation payout to fund my brother's failing business and lavish engagement party. I reported the fraud, and when the bank took everything, they came begging for me to sell my company to save them. Hey, Reddit. My family thought I'd stay quiet while they stole from me and called it love. I walked away, built everything from scratch, and cut them off, but they didn't stay gone for long. Let me take you back to where it all started. My name's Patricia W. Fee. Fuller, 33, former U.S. Army infantry sergeant, 6 years in uniform, 2 tours overseas. I came home early after a shoulder injury, and because my mother wouldn't stop asking me to visit, she said the family needed me. I drove 8 hours back to my hometown expecting quiet. Instead, I walked into a circus. Boxes stacked in the hallway, champagne bottles popping, a photographer shouting directions. My younger brother, Caleb, stood in the living room in a white suit, posing with his fiancée like he was on a magazine cover. Dad, Arthur Ward, was barking orders at the caterers, pretending he still ran a $1 million company. The driveway told the truth. 2 second-hand sedans and an old truck with fading paint. Caleb spotted me near the door and threw his arms wide. The hero's home. Try not to scare the guests, big sister. The hug was quick, all elbows and perfume. Cameras flashed behind him. Arthur glanced over his shoulder. About time you showed up. We've been busy building something real while you've been off playing soldier. He turned back to a waiter before I could answer. Mom came out from this kitchen, drying her hands on the hem of her apron. Mara looked smaller than I remembered. Thin shoulders, gray around the eyes. She reached for me like she'd been waiting for years. You look strong, she said, voice rough from coughing. Stronger than ever, I said. Her eyes softened. Good. I worry you forget how proud I am. I didn't forget. She'd been the only one who ever said it. Dinner that night was loud. Arthur filled the table with cheap wine and louder opinions. Caleb sat at the head, describing his crypto brand and the investors lining up. Arthur nodded along like he understood. Caleb pointed at me with his fork. You should put some of that separation payout into something real. I could double it in 6 months. Arthur jumped in. Listen to him. Real adults make their own wealth. Working for the government is just following orders. I cut a piece of steak, chewed slowly, and said nothing. Silence stretched. It made both of them twitch. Arthur filled it again. You can't live off discipline forever, daughter. The world rewards risk. Some risks, I said finally. Just look like stupidity with better lighting. Caleb laughed too loud. Still talking in slogans. Mom laid a hand on my arm. Let it go, she whispered. Her cough broke the moment. Deep, dry, painful. She waved it off, forced a smile. Just dust in my throat. When she left to make tea, the room felt emptier. Arthur bragged about the upcoming wedding, how it would remind people the Wards are still a name worth knowing. Caleb scrolled through his phone, showing off pictures of the rented venue and luxury cars. I looked around the table. Same house, same people, same noise. Only I had changed. Years of structure, of commands, and clarity don't mix with chaos disguised as confidence. After dessert, Mom pressed a folded bill into my hand near the doorway. For gas, she said softly. I know things are tight while you find your next step. It was $50. I hadn't asked for it, and it hurt more than anything Arthur or Caleb had said all night. Keep it, Mom. She shook her head. Let me do one thing for you. Her cough came again, harsher. I steadied her by the elbow until she caught her breath. She smiled through it, pretending nothing was wrong. Behind us, Arthur was already shouting about the guest list, Caleb laughing into his phone. I kissed her forehead and stepped outside. The air smelled like rain and burnt food from the kitchen vent. The house lights glowed behind me, warm but false. I had come home hoping for quiet. What I found was a family too loud to hear reason, too proud to notice they were drowning. I started the truck, stared once at the windows, and said it out loud to no one. I came home looking for peace. Instead, I found a family drunk on its own noise. The next morning, I stopped by the bank to check my accounts before driving to the gym. My balance flashed 0. My separation, payout, and savings, $90,000, were gone. It wasn't a glitch. The transaction log showed a withdrawal processed under a notarized power of attorney, naming Arthur Ward as my agent. The signature looked like mine. The notary's stamp leaned crooked, dated the week I was overseas. The banker leaned over the counter. This shows a power of attorney on file authorizing Arthur Ward to move funds on your behalf. If this isn't yours, you can file an affidavit of forgery and we'll route it to our fraud unit. It isn't mine, I said. She hesitated, then printed a packet. Take these to the police as well. I folded the papers and left. The drive home was short and silent, the kind of silence before a fight. Arthur was outside, pretending to direct workers who were setting up tents for the engagement party. He wore a gold watch that looked new, yelling at a kid to unload boxes faster. Caleb sat on the porch scrolling through his phone, laughing at something online. I parked, walked up the steps, and held the statement out. Dad, want to explain this? He barely glanced at it. Oh, that. You were overseas. Caleb needed seed money for his launch. The bank had paperwork, power of attorney. I moved it so he could start his business. I waited. You mean you stole it? Arthur's tone sharpened. Watch your mouth. It's family money. Everything here exists because of me. Caleb looked up, smiling like a spoiled kid. Relax, soldier. I'll double it for you. It's called investing. Investing? I said. You mean gambling with other people's money? Arthur's eyes narrowed. Don't start your moral lectures again. You think discipline equals wisdom? You've been trained to follow orders, not to think. I stared at him. I've been trained to recognize a liar. Mom came out from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. She froze when she saw the paper in my hand. What's going on? Arthur turned defensive. Nothing serious, just money talk. She's overreacting. She looked between us, pale. Arthur, you didn't. I did what any father would do, he interrupted. She's sitting on cash while her brother's trying to build something. Caleb stood, adjusting his shirt cuffs. It's temporary. Once the coin hits the market, I'll send it back with interest. I laughed once. No humor in it. You can't even pay for your own wedding dinner, but sure, you'll be the next tech genius. Caleb's smile faded. You don't understand business. I understand theft. Mom's voice broke. Please, all of you stop. I saw her hands shaking, her face drawn. She hated conflict, but hated lies more. I took out my phone and hit record. I held it low, screen off. My voice stayed level. So you admit you took my payout? Arthur crossed his arms. It's still family money. And you filed a forged power of attorney in my name. He looked away. You're being dramatic. Caleb muttered, You always act like you're better than us. I turned to Mom. You knew. Her eyes filled, but she couldn't speak. I could see the guilt tearing her in. Arthur pointed a finger. Don't drag your mother into this. I pocketed the phone. Don't worry, she's the only one here I still respect. Arthur laughed, short and bitter. Go ahead, make a scene. You'll regret it. I won't raise my voice in my mother's house, I said quietly, but if you ever touch my name again, you'll wish you hadn't. Caleb smirked. You going to fight us, tough girl? I stepped forward until we were nose to nose. If I do, you won't walk away. His confidence cracked. He stepped back, muttering something about anger issues. Arthur barked a laugh. You've changed. Think you're some kind of hero now? You're just a broken soldier with nothing but muscles and attitude. I didn't blink. Maybe, but at least I earned mine. Mom tried again, pleading. Patricia, please, let's just sit down. We can fix this. There's nothing to fix, I said. The money's gone, but I'm not. I turned for the door. Arthur shouted after me. You walk out. You're no daughter of mine. I didn't look back. That's the first honest thing you've said. Outside, the noise from the wedding prep faded. The air felt heavy, but my thoughts were clear. Back in my apartment, I laid out everything on the table. Bank printouts, email copies, the forged, notarized, POA with stamp and serial, all of it. I took photos, saved them on 2 separate drives, and uploaded them to the cloud. Then I replayed the conversation from my phone. Arthur's voice was clear. You were overseas. Caleb needed seed money. Evidence enough to bury them if I needed to. For the first time since returning home, I felt calm, not peaceful, focused. They thought I'd react like before, shouting and storming out, giving them control. But soldiers don't rush. We calculate. I looked at the folder labeled Family Records, zipped it, and sent a copy to a secure email. Then I turned off the lights and sat in the dark, the screen glow fading out. They wanted a soldier's money, I said to myself. They forgot soldiers keep records. The wedding day came fast. I told myself I wouldn't go, but Mom called that morning. Her voice was weak, her breath short. Please, Patricia, just be there, for me. So I went. Not for them, for her. The venue was a rented country estate an hour out of town. From a distance, it looked expensive. Up close, it smelled fake. Leased luxury cars lined the drive. Borrowed jewelry glittered under rented chandeliers, and staff moved in panic behind fake smiles. Caleb stood in the center of it all, live streaming his own wedding entrance. He wore a gold-trimmed suit, talking into his phone camera. Big day for the Wards. Legacy moves forward, baby. His followers spammed heart emojis as he kissed the screen. Mom sat near the front, pale and trembling, but smiling when she saw me. You came, she whispered. I promised you, I said, helping her sit comfortably. Her hand felt cold. Arthur was everywhere, barking at the florist, the DJ, the photographers. His tone was still the same old authority, though his reputation in town had already tanked. The logistics company had folded, but he acted like a CEO, giving orders to loyal employees. When he spotted me, his smile was tight. Glad you decided to act civilized today. I'm here for Mom, I said. He didn't answer, just turned to shout at a waiter about champagne glasses. Guests arrived in waves, old business partners who'd lost money with him, friends who whispered about his debts. I saw them exchange looks, wondering how he was affording all this. During the ceremony, Arthur took the microphone. His voice boomed through the speakers. Today marks the future of the Ward family. Legacy, honor, and entrepreneurship. Values that built our name. The irony almost made me laugh. The company was gone, the money stolen, and he was still performing. Caleb stood next to him, nodding like a politician's son. I stayed near Mom, silent. Then it started to unravel. The planner hurried up the aisle with a tablet and a card reader, cradled like a baby. She leaned toward Arthur's mic and kept her voice even. Mr. Ward, we still need the final payment released before the kitchen plates the main course. Arthur forced a smile. Run it again. She turned the screen toward him. He tapped, swiped, waited. The reader chirped and flashed red, declined. Caleb slid in beside him with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. It's a limit thing. He tried his card. Read again. The planner winced. I'm sorry. Our contract pauses services until payment clears. Arthur turned to me, his voice loud enough for everyone. Patricia was supposed to cover this. Every head turned. I didn't move. No, I wasn't. Caleb stepped closer. Fake laugh gone. Come on, don't do this here. You're sitting on army money while we're trying to keep the day together. Army money? I said. You mean the money you already stole? Guests started recording. I saw phones rise, red lights flashing. Arthur barked, Don't humiliate your brother in front of everyone. He did that himself, I said, calm and steady. You filed a forged power of attorney in my name, emptied my account, and now you want me to pay for the catering. You two don't need a wedding. You need a conscience. Gasps rippled through the room. Caleb's fiancé froze, face pale, as guests whispered. Arthur shouted, Lower your voice. I stepped toward the microphone. The only thing I cover is my integrity. You stole from me, and now you're asking for applause. The room went silent except for the rain outside hitting the windows. Caleb's live stream kept rolling. Thousands of viewers watching the collapse live. Arthur tried to speak, voice cracking. You think this makes you righteous? You're tearing this family apart. I looked at Mom. She sat frozen, eyes glassy, a single tear running down her cheek. I mouthed, I'm sorry. Then I turned and walked toward the exit. Arthur shouted something behind me, but I didn't listen. Outside, the cold air hit hard. I walked past rows of cars, past the confused photographers and guests whispering. Someone near the valet booth muttered, "Respect to her." I kept walking until the noise faded completely. They called me 2 weeks after the wedding. A detective from the county fraud unit asked if I could come down to the precinct and verify a few signatures. I already knew why. I'd sent copies to a secure email, but seeing a badge on the other end made it official. That afternoon, I was making coffee when the front door crashed open. Arthur filled the doorway like he owned the building, a stack of papers clutched in one hand. Caleb stood behind him. Too clean, too calm, sweat speckling his hairline. "Sign this," Arthur said before I could ask what. He thrust a sheaf of forms toward me. Typed statements. A draft affidavit. "Sign and we'll fix the optics. Protect your brother. It's family business." Caleb smiled the way a man smiles before he calls the movers. Nervous. Practiced. "Just do it. We'll make it look better. You know how these things go." I held my coffee until it got cold. Then I set the mug down and looked at the paper. The signature lines were there. My name printed in tidy script on a bank authorization. My name forged. Not even a decent forgery. The loop on the P was wrong. I'd seen better handwriting from kids in boot camp. "You forged my name," I said. "You'll fix your own mess." Arthur's face went crimson. "You'll destroy this family if you go to the cops." "You already did." The words were calmer than I felt. They landed like a weight in the small room. He shoved the papers at me. "Sign. You'll save your mother from public shame. You want her dragged into this?" His voice pitched like a man making threats he couldn't fully own. I put the forms in my pocket and walked out. Arthur yelled after me, the same line about duty and legacy. But I didn't stop. Legacy without truth is just theater. At the precinct, I handed the detective everything: the bank printouts, the withdrawal record, the fraudulent notarized power of attorney, the audio of Arthur saying he moved the money, time-stamped emails where Caleb boasted about launch funds, my travel records proving I was out of the country when the withdrawal occurred. I watched as his face tightened and then softened into something like professional interest. "We'll open an investigation," he told me. "This helps a lot." He also confirmed our state is one-party consent for recordings, so the audio would hold up. Leaving the station, I felt the tightness in my chest loosen for the first time, not relief. This was work. Real, solid work. News vans came the following week. Reporters camped outside my mother's street. Bright lights in the dark. Arthur's name ran through the local channel mid-afternoon. Ward Logistics under federal scrutiny. A headline flashed about alleged embezzlement. Caleb's startup hit the news too. Investors asked for audits. Lawyers filed papers. I watched the clips with the same flat focus. I used to run recon. When the prosecutor announced charges against Caleb, forgery, document falsification, wire fraud, the echo in my chest wasn't triumph. It was confirmation, proof that I'd done the right thing. The town that used to gossip about my soldier ways had something to chew on. The fallout landed on my mother like a thunderclap. She called before the storm broke, voice trembling. "They came for the trucks, Vixeni," she said, "and people talk." She sounded smaller than the woman who'd slipped me $50 at the table. "I'm sorry," she told me, though I didn't need it. A day after the press conference, she stopped by my rented room. She moved slowly, like the air around her cost too much. "You did what I couldn't," she said, fingers finding mine like a lifeline. She trembled. Her breath had that same dry rasp. "Be careful," she added. "They will come at you." I put down a glass of water and sat close enough for her to lean on my shoulder. No speeches, no promises, just a steady presence. She left after 10 minutes, folding the small scarf she always carried, and I watched her walk back down the street like she was moving through molasses. A week later, chaos returned in a sharper form. Arthur went to pieces in public, phone calls screaming into the receiver, past partners refusing to meet. He stumbled into Mom's house, slurring apologies that would have been funny if they weren't dangerous. I stepped between him and the hallway where Mom sat, and he lashed out, angry and terrified. The shove surprised me. He pushed her shoulder hard enough that the frail bone under her arm jutted. Mara stumbled, arm flailing, a small sound escaping her. In that moment, I saw the last of my restraint. I didn't think. My hand closed at his collar. I pinned him against the wall with a single controlled movement, my forearm at his throat, my fingers digging into the fabric of his shirt. His feet skittered, his face went raw with shock. "Do that again," I said, my voice low, "and you'll regret it." He tried to laugh, a wet, broken sound. Caleb stepped back as if a glass wall had formed between us. The bravado fled his eyes. Someone screamed in the next room. I tightened my grip a fraction. Arthur's breath hitched. "Patricia," he croaked. But the force in the room had shifted. The man who'd shouted orders 3 nights ago now looked like a boy caught stealing. I held him until he stopped struggling and the color drained from his face. Then I released him. He slid down the wall, hands on his knees, shaking. Caleb stood frozen, half proud, half terrified. Mom wiped her face with the back of her hand, small and furious. "You should be ashamed," she whispered at Arthur, voice ragged. He met her eyes and didn't answer. I left town with 1 duffel bag and a tank of gas. No plan, no company, just silence. The city I chose sat by the coast, cheap, humid, always smelling of salt and oil. I rented a small room above an auto shop. The floor creaked when the wind changed and the shower leaked cold water, but it was mine. Daytime, I worked downstairs fixing bikes and engines. The owner, a quiet man named Rick, didn't ask questions. Nights, I worked security at a loading dock on the edge of the harbor. The pay was small, the hours brutal. I ate from cans, slept 4 hours a night, and trained in the alley with a pair of rusted weights I found behind the shop. Discipline doesn't fade. It either breaks you or builds you again. By the 2nd month, I'd saved enough for proper tools. I repaired a client's delivery truck after hours, charged him half price, and got his whole fleet the next week. One job led to another. Soon, I registered my own license under Fuller Protective Services. A security subcontract here, a repair gig there. Small wins, but clean ones. 3 months in, I wasn't rich, but I could breathe again. My body healed, my shoulder stopped locking, and for the first time since the military, I didn't wake up to shouting. I didn't think about my father or Caleb. I worked, ate, trained, and repeated. Every hour was accounted for. Then the phone rang one night around midnight. The number was from home. "Ms. Fuller," a woman's voice said, "this is St. Augustine Hospital. It's your mother." I didn't let her finish. I grabbed my keys and drove straight through the storm. Rain hammered the windshield like gravel. The drive took 5 hours. I didn't stop once. When I finally pulled into the hospital parking lot, dawn was bleeding through the clouds. Mara Fuller had passed at 2:17 a.m. The nurse looked at me with practiced sympathy. She went peacefully. Peaceful wasn't the word that came to mind. The word was alone. The funeral was small, gray, and quiet. The chapel smelled of damp flowers and cheap candles. Caleb sat in the front row beside his fiancée, face tilted just right for photos. His phone sat on his lap, screen glowing faintly. I didn't need to check social media to know he'd already posted something sentimental. Arthur stood near the casket, stone-faced. He hadn't shaved in days. When he saw me, his mouth tightened. "You shouldn't have come," he muttered. "I'm her daughter," I said. "You stressed her out. All your drama, the police, the press. You think that didn't kill her faster?" I didn't answer. Grief doesn't need an audience. The service lasted 30 minutes. A priest read a passage she would have liked, something about forgiveness and rest. I watched the casket lower and thought about all the times she tried to keep peace between wolves. After the burial, guests drifted off. Caleb stood with a small group, laughing lightly as if the funeral was another social event. Arthur lingered near the grave, pretending to pray. I stepped closer to the coffin. Something looked wrong. Mom's wedding ring was missing. I called the undertaker aside. "Where's the ring?" He frowned. "It wasn't on her when the body came in, ma'am." We checked the record. She always wore it. He nodded, apologetic but firm. It wasn't with her effects. I looked toward Arthur and Caleb. They avoided my eyes. I walked away before I said something that would turn a cemetery into a crime scene. At the hospital's reception desk, the nurse who'd called me stopped me before I left. She held out a small wooden box, polished but worn. She asked me to give you this. The nurse said you'd know when to open it. I took it carefully. It was light, sealed with a small brass latch. I turned it in my hands, tempted to open it right there, but I didn't. Not yet. On the drive back, the rain started again, harder this time. The road blurred under the wipers. The box sat on the passenger seat, silent and heavy with everything left unsaid. I reached the city just before dawn. The streets were empty, the neon signs flickering. I carried the box upstairs and set it on the table. I didn't touch it again that night. When I woke up, the light from the window hit it directly like it was waiting. I still didn't open it. Some truths could wait until I was ready to live with them. Work resumed as usual. Engines, security shifts, the grind. But something had changed. The world felt thinner, quieter. They'd buried the only person worth forgiving. A year passed. Fuller Protective Services was running clean and steady. Warehouse patrols, private contracts, a few long-term clients. My crew was small but loyal. No drama, no excuses, just work. I lived above the office. One desk, one cot, one rule. Stay moving forward. It was raining the night they came back. Hard rain, the kind that drowns sound. I was finishing reports when pounding hit the door, heavy, desperate. I opened it. Arthur and Caleb stood there, drenched, faces hollow, clothes clinging to them. Their confidence was gone, but the arrogance stayed in their eyes. Arthur spoke first. "You wouldn't even have this life without me." His voice carried the kind of pride that survives ruin. Caleb added quickly, "We're family. We just need a place to start again." Everything went south. Lawsuits, debts, the house, gone. They looked like beggars trying to sound like kings. I leaned on the doorframe and said nothing. Silence makes weak people show their cracks. Arthur's voice trembled. "You think this company built itself? You think discipline comes from nowhere? I raised you." "You trained me," I said, calm, "and you trained me to never end up like you." Caleb took a step forward, fake sincerity coating every word. "Look, I was stupid before. I get that. I just want to make things right. Maybe we could talk privately." I studied his face. His eyes kept flicking down toward his hand where a phone half hid in his sleeve. In the window reflection, I saw the faint red blink of a recording light. He was filming. I let it happen. "All right," I said, "let's talk." He followed me into the office, Arthur lingering by the door. Caleb started his performance, voice shaky, but loud enough for the phone. "You've changed. You don't care about blood anymore. Mom would be ashamed." I kept my tone level. "Mom would be disappointed it took you this long to realize what you are." He pushed, looking for a line he could cut later. "So, you admit you don't care if we lose everything?" "I care about people who tell the truth." He smiled faintly, knowing he got what he needed. He ended the talk early, saying he'd call tomorrow. When they left, I locked the door and opened my laptop. Within an hour, the clip was online. Caleb's edit was neat, rehearsed. The headline read, "Veteran disowns family after mother's death." His followers flooded it with comments about loyalty, forgiveness, and how I'd turned cold. I didn't respond right away. I waited. Let him build his little stage. By noon the next day, I released the full recording. No cuts, no edits, clear view of his phone recording me first. I posted timestamps, background noise alignment, and a statement. Manipulation isn't love. Family doesn't blackmail. The internet flipped within minutes. Comments flooded in. He tried to scam his own sister again. Caleb never learns. She deserves peace. Caleb deleted his post by evening. His account went private soon after. But Arthur wasn't done. That night, I heard tires screech outside. The door rattled again, harder this time. I opened it and found Arthur soaked, furious, eyes bloodshot. "You think you're a hero now?" he shouted. "You humiliated us. You ruined your own blood for strangers online." I stepped back, letting him inside. "You did that yourself." He jabbed a finger at me, shaking. "You could have fixed this. You could have saved what was left." There was nothing left to save. He slammed his fist against the desk. "You want revenge? You got it. You happy now?" His breathing went ragged, face pale. "You?" He stopped mid-word, clutching his chest. His knees buckled, and he fell sideways. For 3 seconds, I didn't move, just watched him struggle for air, gasping like the world owed him one last apology. Then I reached for my phone and called it in. "Cardiac event," I told dispatch. "Male, mid-60s." When the medics arrived, they worked fast. I stood by the door out of the way, watching as they lifted him onto the stretcher. Caleb wasn't with him this time. One of the EMTs asked, "Your family?" "Unfortunately," I said. They loaded him up and drove off. I watched the lights fade through the rain. Inside, I wiped water off the floor and sat at the desk. For a moment, the thought crossed my mind. I should have let him go. But mercy isn't weakness, it's restraint, and I wasn't them. An hour later, the hospital called. Ms. Fuller, your father's stable. He'll live. I stared at the wall. He always does, I said, and hung up. The rain outside grew heavier. I turned off the lights, sat by the window, and opened the small wooden box that had waited a year. Inside were 4 folded letters and a faded pawn receipt. My mother's handwriting on each envelope, dated, careful, deliberate. The receipt was from a pawn shop downtown marked for 1 gold wedding ring. At first light, I took the pawn ticket downtown and bought her ring back. It was smaller than I remembered and heavier than it should have been. The room went quiet except for the rain tapping the glass like a slow drumbeat. I stacked the letters neatly, my thumb brushing the top one. I had the truth now, and I was done sparing feelings. The storm rolled in again the next night. Thick clouds smothered the city lights, and the rain came in sheets that rattled the metal siding of the building. I was at my desk finishing reports when the pounding started, heavy, frantic, unmistakable. I already knew who it was. When I opened the door, Arthur and Caleb stood there again, soaked to the bone. Water dripped off their jackets, pooling on the steps. They looked beaten, but not humble, faces drawn with desperation, but still clinging to that old pride that never learned to die. Arthur spoke first. His voice was gravel over guilt. "We need one last chance." Caleb echoed him a shade softer. "You've made your point. Just help us get back on our feet." Their eyes begged, but their tone demanded. They still didn't understand. I stepped aside and let them in. No emotion, no words. They dripped onto the floor, tracking mud through the office. I shut the door and sat down at the table. The small wooden box lay open beside me, the one I'd waited a year to touch. Arthur eyed it suspiciously. "What's that supposed to be?" "Mom's truth," I said. He gave a low, bitter laugh. "Your mother never understood how things really worked." I picked up the first letter, the paper soft from age. "Then maybe you'll understand this." I began to read aloud. "Arthur took your money, said you'd understand, said a daughter should never question her father's decisions." Arthur's shoulders stiffened, his jaw clenched, but he stayed quiet. I opened the second letter. "Caleb forged your name. They called it family loyalty. Said siblings share everything, even signatures." Caleb flinched. "She didn't know the full story," he said quickly. "I was trying to keep us afloat. We had debts." I cut him off. "You had habits." The third letter came next. My voice didn't rise, but the air in the room got heavier with each line. "Your father feared you, not for your anger, but because you could live without him. Caleb needed lies to breathe." The silence afterward felt alive. The rain outside hit harder, as if pressing against the walls to listen. Arthur snapped first. "Your mother was delusional." The table cracked under my hand as I slammed it once. The sound echoed through the room. "Say that again." He froze, eyes locked on mine. Caleb stepped back, instinctive fear flickering across his face. I leaned forward, steady voice cutting through the thunder. "She saw you for what you are. That's why you hate what she wrote." Arthur's lips twitched, but no words came. Caleb broke the pause, desperate. "You think you're perfect? You left. You weren't here when things fell apart. You don't know how hard we had it." I reached into the box and slid the pawn receipt across the table. The paper was yellowed, but clear. Her wedding ring, sold 2 months before she died. Arthur's eyes flicked down. His face tightened like a rope pulled too hard. Caleb's voice cracked. "We needed money for rent. Dad said she'd understand." "She didn't," I said. "She wore that ring until her hands shook too much to lift it, and you took it." Arthur slammed his palm on the table, trying to take control again. "You think this makes you a woman? Reading letters from someone too sick to know what she was saying?" I stood slowly. The chair legs scraped the floor. "You want to talk about being an adult? It starts with owning your mess. You've both run from that your entire lives." Arthur's fists trembled. "You think you're better than us? You think standing alone makes you righteous?" "No," I said. "It just means I stopped kneeling." Caleb muttered, "You're cold." "Maybe," I said, "but I didn't steal from the woman who raised me." Lightning lit the room white for a second, throwing our shadows across the walls. Arthur's breathing grew rough again, his face pale, jaw working like he wanted to speak, but couldn't find the words. I walked to the window, pulled the curtain aside, and watched the rain batter the street below. "She knew this would happen," I said quietly. "She wrote about it." Arthur sneered. "About what?" I turned, holding up the last letter. "That you'd come back. She said you'd both return when everything else was gone." I unfolded the page and read, "They will return. Don't open the door too quickly. You owe them nothing except truth." Arthur's face broke, rage mixing with guilt, defiance fading under the weight of her words. Caleb rubbed his forehead, whispering something I couldn't hear. I took the last of the letters, stacked them neatly, and set them down in front of them. That's her forgiveness. It's more than either of you deserve. Arthur's eyes darted to the door. Caleb tried one last time. We can start over. We can fix it. There's nothing left to fix. I reached for the door handle and pulled it open. The wind roared in, rain sweeping across the floor, scattering the papers. One letter slid to Arthur's feet. He bent slowly, picked it up, and stared at Mara's handwriting in the corner. She wrote your name on everyone, I said, even when she knew you'd never earn it. Arthur's lips quivered. He turned, gripping the letter so hard it crumpled in his fist. Caleb took a shaky step forward. You're really kicking us out into this? You walked into it long before tonight. The rain blew harder, the wind carrying the smell of salt and rust. I looked at them both, my father and my brother, two men who'd mistaken my patience for surrender. No, I said quietly. I didn't become better than you. I became what you couldn't. They said nothing. Arthur stepped into the downpour first, shoulders hunched, the letter pressed to his chest. Caleb followed a moment later, muttering curses drowned by thunder. The door shut behind them with a hollow sound that felt final. I stood for a long minute, staring at the empty doorway, then gathered the remaining letters and placed them back in the box. The air smelled like wet earth and freedom. I exhaled once, slow and steady. Quiet feels different when it's earned. Weeks passed. The news spread on its own. Caleb's last company folded completely. Lawsuits unpaid. Reputation ruined. His social media vanished overnight. Arthur suffered another heart attack, left half paralyzed, living alone in a rented room above a pawn shop. Same chain that stamped the pawn receipt in Mom's box. I never returned their calls. Some debts don't need collection. Instead, I turned my focus toward something that would have made my mother proud. I started a small veteran scholarship in her name, the Mara Fuller Fund. No cameras, no sponsors, just quiet help for soldiers trying to rebuild. A week later, I drove to the cemetery before sunrise. The sky was pale gray, the grass still slick from morning rain. I carried two things in my pocket, Mom's recovered wedding ring and my military medal. Her headstone was simple, clean. I knelt, brushing water off the carved name. You warned me, Mom, I said quietly. You were right. I placed the ring beside the medal. They gleamed together in the new light. They took my money, I whispered, but they never took my discipline. The clouds thinned and sunlight broke through, spreading across the grass and over her name. I stood there for a moment, watching the gold reflection slide across both metal surfaces, one symbol of love, one of survival. Then I turned and walked back toward the car. The road ahead was empty, clean, silent. Family taught me everything about loyalty, mostly what it's not.